I am about to make a peony with the Saracino Pasta Scultura. I quite like this one just because it's reasonably flexible, but it holds its shape and sets up quite firm. Used to working with, where are we? I've just made some. Used to working with chocolate, which is a really nice product as well. So this is a petal I made with chocolate. Not that long ago, like maybe an hour or so ago. You can see it holds its shape nicely, but it's still got some nice flex to it, so I can reposition it and make it take whatever shape I want. So if I make a flower out of that, and I've given the petals good enough structure, that I can then lay the petals down more on or lift them up and make it work quite nicely. I'm hoping the Saracino will work similarly. It might be too thin, it might be too flexible, I'm not sure. But we'll find out. This is a peony I made with my own homemade modeling chocolate. This has none of that flex. Once the petals are back at room temperature, they are rock solid. So it makes them very fragile. I can't really adjust that at all without it cracking. But that's kind of what we're aiming for. So doing the quick peony. The rose, I think the rose takes a little bit too long. The peony's more simple. The rose is nice, but this is one made with chocolate. It works the same with the Saracino, the sculpting paste. And you can see with this is where the chocolate's maybe got a bit of an edge. It's still flexible, so maybe the Saracino will do similar, who knows. But that's all good, we'll see how we go. So I've just run this through my pasta roller. I've got one slightly thicker one and one much thinner. This will be for the inside, this will be for the outsides. This is how the product actually comes out. So it's a rock solid lump that's really quite hard. You've got to cut slices off it, and I warmed mine in the microwave. You probably shouldn't, but it comes up very hard and shiny, and it's brittle. So you think that there's something wrong with it until you warm it up and start moving it around a little bit. So you never want to overheat modeling chocolate, any kind. So it's always a little bit risky working it in the microwave, but also there's no point in trying to be a hero and damaging your hands trying to get a product to a workable state. So let's see. I'll start with these. So these are cutters that I've got from Bake Boss. It's where I work. So, and no, I'm not getting paid for this. It just happens to be where I work. These cutters are fine. But what I do like about this set is this, what do you call it? This petal veiner. So this petal veiner is what I use for the outside petal of my roses. It's a peony petal veiner. Peony, or even I think originally a poppy veiner maybe, but it's a really nice veiner for that sort of thing. Now these, I'm just going to reshape them because I like them a little bit longer and more interesting in shape. So just give them a little bit of randomness. So just stretch them out. And it's something a lot of people are a bit scared to do with their cutters, but more people should do it. And just don't be afraid to reshape your cutters and squish them around and make them more interesting. So there we go. Now, the nicest thing about the chocolate, they don't really call it modeling chocolate, but this is true modeling chocolate, the Pasta Scultura, and I'm probably mangling the pronunciation of that, but it's fine. The nicest thing about working with a modeling chocolate type product is that it doesn't dry out. So you can bulk your processes. I'm just going to pop out a ton of these. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15-ish. And that should be enough for a center. There's all my centers, put them off to one side. Go my next size and I'll do maybe 10 of these, or no, I'll do 5. I'll do 5. I'll do 7-ish. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I'll do some more of the larger ones just because I like the way the larger ones work. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then screw this up and I can reuse it because again it doesn't dry out. And onto my thicker sheet. Oh, try and get these in some sort of order. Makes it a little bit easier when you're working on them. Find what bits you're after. And the really large ones, so we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And just looking at that, I think I want more of the larger ones, so I'll do 10 of those. 1, 2, 3, 4. Where can I get a nice 4 from? 4, 5. There, we'll go for 10 outer petals. I might just screw that up. And too lazy to go put this through the pasta machine again. It's over there. I love my fondant sheeter. It's kind of amazing. I call it a pasta machine, but it's a fondant sheeter. There we go. So when you're using your fondant sheeter, you don't need to use as much corn flour as you would if you're rolling something out by hand. You use a lot of corn flour with modelling chocolate and it helps. It does make it go a little bit brittle, but it's not too bad. So that's one of the cool things. This is going to be a long video, by the way. I'm already 7 minutes in and we'll get cracking as fast as we can on this. So because I tend to make a lot of mess with my dusting, I've got a cheap piece of foam. I've got several really nice pieces that I use for like classier demos, but this is just a fast test, so it's actually stadium seating. But it's exactly the same. Can't get this stuff anymore, which is unfortunate, but it's fine. Done. Just get a bit of floral foam. So what I'm doing is I'm running around the edge of each of these just to thin off the edges quickly. And you can see that I'm not having to cover anything up. I'm not having to wait for things to dry, or I'm not worried about things drying out. And keep it moving. This is a lot of repetition, so there's a lot of prep work at the beginning and then a few seconds of assembly, which freaks people out a little bit. And that one done. So when I'm using a ball tool, I like to use a metal ball tool just because they tend to be less sticky than the plastic ones. They don't pick up as much rubbish on them. So you start on the actual foam mat and then you just nip around the edge of the petal. So you're not starting on the petal, you're not going from the inside out, you're going from the outside in, and you just nip around the edge, then you turn it over to thin it back the other way. And you get a nice thin edge, and that will be blurry as heck. So where are we? See if that'll focus. Maybe. So I don't want it to be super thin, but I want it to be reasonably thin. So I'll try and make sure that that stays focused down there. Yep. And whip around the edge on each of these. Whip around the edge. Now I've left the beginning of this out because I'll do that in a minute. I think I'll do it in a minute because it's kind of a way to break up the monotony. So now this is for like a showpiece flower, you'd have maybe 3 or 4 of these on a cake at the most, but you wouldn't generally do a whole big bouquet of these for a client because they would take too long to do. So if you're doing a cake where you've got like quite a lot of flower work on it, you do a much more simple version of this. So you'd maybe just have the center, 3 or 4 petals around the center, or 3 to 5 petals around the center, a couple of layers of that, and then a layer of the large petals, and you'd stop at that. You don't need nearly as many petals as I'm doing on this. I just like to do more petals just to show that it's possible in the chocolate, and just to show how well the weight is supported. It's done. Get that. Oh, I've moved up a size, all right. Now it's important when you're working with chocolate not to keep touching the chocolate. So if I keep holding on to this, it will go liquid in my hands. I've got really hot hands, so it will actually melt to me. And it becomes unworkable. So the reason that I like to batch the jobs is because it means that I'm not fiddling with the chocolate for as long. And getting there. And I'm trying to keep these relatively flat, because when I put them in the veining tool, they will end up getting a little bit more shape from there, but I give them shape at the end. Now with this, I'm just going around the edge. I don't know if you can see, but I'm just going around the edge, and I'm keeping the actual core of the petal quite thick. Not veining the center at all, because it doesn't need it. And also, it's kind of an illusion. You want the chocolate to appear like it's really thin, even though it's still, by my standards, pretty thick. So there we go. And if you've got mistakes, it doesn't really matter with these, because you're making a peony that will have a nice, interesting shape. But they actually look nicer if they're less regular. If they're too regular, they just look like a cabbage. They're actually not my favourite flower at all. I much prefer the roses, because the peonies, if you're not paying attention, they just end up looking cabbagey. So go around. Whoop. Starting to get lazy with these. Now, if you're working with your homemade modelling chocolate, that gets really, really firm, so you have to lay that on your palm for a little bit to warm it up, and then dust it slightly if it needs it. Then you run around it. With this, it's a much softer product, so you don't need to do that. It stays reasonably flexible, but it does set up at room temperature. Whereas with your homemade one, it's going to be prone to cracking, so you have to keep it warmed on like this part of your hand. This stuff, it doesn't matter though, because it has just enough flex in it. So it's self-supporting, it's not going to droop. Yeah, it's not going to droop if you hold it, but it's still got some flex to it. It's a reasonably warm day here. I do have the aircon on in the other part of the kitchen, but it's not exactly cold in here. So you can do this in a relatively warm house. I think it's about 24 degrees in here. And the humidity doesn't seem to affect this as much. So even with your homemade chocolate, the humidity is not a huge issue. Now, the bit that I forgot was the actual sticks for this. So I'm going to wander over and grab a stick, and I'll be back. Okay. So for the center, I like to make these completely edible. I've got a plastic lollipop stick. I like using plastic lollipop sticks because kids are familiar with lollipop sticks. They know what they are. You can poke these in a cake, and when you're cutting through the cake, you're less likely to get chips off it. They don't absorb liquid from the cake, so they don't go soggy like the plastic ones do. Sorry, like the paper ones do. Now, just so that the LCM will stick to the center of this, or the chocolate will stick to the center of this, I'm just going to rough up one end. And, sorry, doing it so I can see it and you can't. So I've got a small scalpel, and I'm just running it around the center, just to give it a little bit of texture so that the chocolate's got something to grab onto, otherwise this will just slide straight on through. And make sure that that's cleaned up and that there's no like little bits of chocolate going to come off. Oh, sorry, bits of plastic going to come off, because no one wants plastic in their food. Getting there. Alright, so that's all good. Now I've got a Kellogg's LCM, which is a Rice Krispie treat. And it's a choc chip one because I was too lazy to try and find the ones that don't have anything in them. It doesn't really matter. So you go choc chip sides down because you don't want them in the middle. It doesn't matter if they're on the outside. And I've just dusted my hand so it doesn't stick to my hand too much because this stuff's really sticky. Ooh, lost a choc chip. Most of the choc chips or whatever topping you have on these will break off as you're doing this. And that's fine. It doesn't matter if you stay on or if they all come off. You don't need to obsessively pick them off. Nobody's got time for that. So now I'm pushing this into a really tight ball shape. If I was doing a rose, I'd do like a more an onion shape, a pointed one. And you want that really tight, super tightly compressed. And done. Take your lollipop stick and you want it to go about halfway up. So push that in. Yep. And we're about right there. Yep, so about halfway up, that's good. And wiggle that around so that you've got a bit of space. Grab a little bit of excess chocolate and yep, we're all good. A little bit of excess chocolate and warm it up a lot. So you want this to be really, really hot and really, really sticky. And the oil will start coming out. So if you were to do this to a regular piece of like modeling chocolate, I would say stop what you're doing and put it down because you're going to just have like a mess. But that's okay. So start loading as much of that into the hole as possible. Grab the stick and use that to poke. Oh, hang on, where are we? Yep, use that to poke excess chocolate into the hole. Yep. So that the stick has something to grab hold of. And push the rest of the chocolate in and around that bowl. Make sure that it's nice and tight at the top again because pushing the stick through tends to loosen off the top of the ball. And you don't want the stick to come rocketing through the top of your flour when you've got it sitting around because the flours are really quite heavy. Because there's a lot of chocolate there to go on to the actual piece. So put that there. Just putting a little bit of extra chocolate there. And then you've got an edible center. If you've got the Kellogg's Kaleidos, they're a cocoa flavored one of these with little, they're like M&Ms, like little mini M&Ms all over it. They're really delicious, all through it. So they're quite a nice center as well. And there's my center ready to go. So I just need to leave that at room temperature for about 15 minutes. That should be as long as it takes to color all of that up, and that will set and hopefully be a nice strong base for my flour. Now, next step. Now I've thinned the edges on all of these. Yep, thinned the edges on all of these. I'm going to use my veining tool. So just lay that there and stomp it. And this is going to be really boring to watch, sorry. But I'll go as fast as I possibly can. Done. It's also going to be really wobbly. So you got the best of both worlds. Seasickness and boring repetition with my droning voice going on. But anyway, so when I'm doing this, I'm trying to put more pressure towards the top end of the petal than through the center, but it's pretty strong, so it doesn't matter. And you'll notice that I'm not using corn flour on the mold because it doesn't really need it. These are nearly set up, nearly firm, just at room temp. So, oh, that's not quite veined enough. It doesn't really matter, but I like them to have a little bit more interest. So done. Now this is a lot more petals than I have for a rose, so this will take a bit of time, but we'll see how we go. I didn't want to do too full on a tutorial here, but I think we're going all the way with it, so we'll see. We're at 20 minutes. And hopefully I can have it done before an hour and my phone won't run out of space, but we'll see how we go. These ones. These ones. I think I might need to stand up to do this. So, yeah. As I'm going larger and larger, I'm heading more towards the edge of the veining tool, or the silicone veiner. It doesn't matter if some of these break. Let's see how bad the wobble is on that. Sorry guys. It's not too bad. Yeah. And most peonies tend to have really vibrant colours, but for this one I think I'm going to try and keep it relatively simple. It'll be a bit of a more fantasy peony, but we'll give it a crack and see how we go. So that's those two sizes done. Whoop. God, I've already started on that. Right. Done. Now, there's no set number of petals that you need to do for this at all. This is just a pattern that I'm choosing. I probably won't use all these petals. I'm just going to keep adding them until it looks right. That should be enough. So this is one of my favourite veiners. I'm really glad that I've got it. Done. And getting there. Just a couple more to go. Again, I don't want too much pattern or design on this yet because I add more of my own on later. And it's really just so that the dusts have something to pick up. There we go. And there we go. Right, so that's veining done. Next stage, colouring. So I've just got some paper towel, and I'm going to lay all these out on paper towels and try and get them mostly up the right way. But we'll see how we go. So if I go like this, it'll be easier with the colouring. So you guys won't be able to see very much of what's going on here yet, but we'll get more interesting. So Again, this video is almost entirely, hey, here's how to do a heap of prep. So, sorry. And getting there. So what I'm doing is making it so that I've got space for colouring each petal. And I could probably do this with an airbrush, you know, it would be a lot quicker. At this stage, I should give that a crack with one of these. Airbrushing might be a better way of doing it. That's my wife arriving home and the bird alarm going off. Because it's always something when I do videos. It's either the cat or the bird. There goes the cat. So, yeah. And just one sec. It's locked. And I'm filming. Yeah. Okay, so get my colour palette and I'll be back. What are you interested? Oh, thanks. Alright, done. Yep. Alright, so shopping bags in and there goes the cat. Sound. So I've got a rose. So these are all lined up ready to go for colour. I've got rose and pale pink. I think I'll go with rose because it's brighter. I've got some moss colour and I'm just going to use that across the bottom of these because it looks nice. And I like to have a really bright green, so I start with a little bit of moss. And so moss coloured green. And then I add some fluoro yellow. That's lemon. Where's my fluoro? There it is. Got some really fluoro yellow. Can you pop the light in the kitchen on? And just mix that around. Thank you. And that gives me a nicer green. And that'll work nicely across the bottom of these. So that just looks a little bit more natural, believe it or not, for the bottom of these. So put that up there. So I like to mix up my own colours. I prefer these Barco ones with the red label just because they're really nice bright colours. If you're doing something that's really fun and you're building up layers of colour, you want to start with a little bit of corn flour and have somewhere that you can kind of use as a crash mat to make sure that you're not adding too much colour. And like that. So I'm going to grab, where are we, this one, bigger brush, and use that to apply my colour across the petals, because that way I can get a nicer kind of appearance on them. I'm going to have to hide those ones a bit, I think, but that's alright. I'm just putting a little bit of this through here. And this is why I wanted the bottoms and tops to be next to each other. I don't tend to get too much of the pink and the green together. Otherwise they'll end up looking muddy. So Right. Getting there. And bring that this way. There we go. Teddy, what are you whinging about? It's not your lunchtime yet. Or not lunchtime, not your dinner time yet. It's still closer to lunchtime. So I'm just going to turn these over. And here we go. To the bottoms. It doesn't matter so much on the inside, the outside's more the interesting side. So you can see they don't vein up as strongly because the veining's more on the outside. Go as fast as I can. And again, conscious that this is boring to watch. And what'd you buy? Oh. That's not so bad. Thanks. Alright, so I'll just stack those over there and move on to these. These central ones don't really need it, but I still just kind of like to make sure that I've got everything. I've got both sides of those, yep, and those, yep. I do, alright. Yeah, the smaller ones really don't need it as much, but it's still just nice to stay in the habit. And turn over. Oh. Stuff everywhere here. Getting there. Got to be careful not to get too much of the green everywhere, because as soon as I start putting pink with it, it just all goes brown. And I want to leave a little bit of kind of white, just because it looks a bit nicer on the petals. Turn these all over. Oh, that's done both sides already. Okay. Yeah, so again, these don't really matter. The inside ones, not for the green at any rate. So, done. Okay, put that green away. And I'll move on to some, take some of that green off. I'll move on to some pink. And try and get as much of that off as possible. And then pink, put these here. Come back there, I'll grab a little bit more, paper towel, I think. Oh, there it is. And a little bit more paper towel. I've got one for the pink and one for the cleaning. And how we're going, we're at 34 minutes, not too bad. So I've got the rough side of the paper towel for cleaning off and the smooth side for sort of mixing. So yeah, with a little bit of corn flour you can layer up colour really nicely in these, because you just add layers of colour without it being too strong. So this is a colour called Rose, and it's a lot stronger than I'd usually use, but these are Peonies, so they can kind of take it a bit. And just go around and dust that on. And yeah, that looks quite nice. almost looks like I care. Anyway, getting there. Did I hear the kettle boil, Tash? See if I can score a cup of tea or coffee. It's just across the top. I'm sort of just brushing across the petals and it's giving me the pattern that I'm after, instead of brushing directly into the grooves. So yeah, instead of brushing into the grooves, brushing across them gives a nicer finish. And some of the green that's still on the brush is just helping to soften off some of that red. It's called rose, but anyway. Okay, so nearly got these ones done. That one's excessive, but it'll do. You just want a really nice soft brush to do this with. Getting there. Turn them over. Turn them over, turn them over. And so after I'm loading up the brush, I'm taking off the excess on the paper towel. That way I don't end up with too much colour coming off the brush. I get that nice kind of stripy pattern instead of just full dark. Got along there. One of the interesting things with the petals that are rolled from the pasta machine, or the fondant sheeter, is it leaves a very slight pattern on it, and it almost makes it look like these lines are printed when the veining's done. Actually makes them take the colour a bit better too. And as fast as I can. Doesn't matter if these are a bit brighter, the central ones. Nearly. Okay, so I can just stack these up now, so that they're out of the way. Losing more than I'm picking up, I think. Anyway, all good, all good. Oh, no, these were bum ends that way, petals towards each other. The theory here, which is not working so well for me, is that I can just run across the tops and not get too much overflow. Getting there. Okay, then we turn them all over. again. I found one that I've missed some green on. Again, not that relevant because they're the central ones. You won't see it anyway, but it's just, I like to keep things right. Okay, and that is all of the dusting done. So that's nearly all the colouring sorted. And we'll get that out of the way and start stacking these up so we've got some room to move. All my centres. And done. Oh, I just cracked one, but that's all right. I'll put that back. No, Teddy. And nearly right, nearly got all my sizings. Okay, that's that, and that. And I'm just going to go wash my hands off a little, I think. Yeah, otherwise I'll just start spreading brown everywhere. And now we start assembling, and this is why I'm using this piece of foam instead of one of my nice ones, because it picks up a lot of colour. So that has set. That's set really well. I'm going to use that as my centre. And now this is the fun part. You go over these again, just with the edge of, you can see some of these are cracking quite badly. So these do set up really firmly, they just take a lot longer. So warm them and then thin the edge and a little tiny bit of water. And this is the bit that freaks a lot of people out because most people don't expect water to glue chocolate, but it does. Just a little bit of water on there, not a huge amount. And put that over the bowl. Thank you. And I'm just blending the edges of that onto the bowl so that I get a nice firm center. And warm that again. And a little bit of water. Now the water will go brown because it's picking up pink and green. So just layer that over the top. And pinch the bum end in. And around the top again. Oh, that way. So these do definitely have a front and back. And that can go over there, actually. Thin that edge a bit more. And I'm not putting these on with any specific order. I'm kind of trying for a few layers of like 5-ish around the center. And thin the edge, nice and thin. Pick up some water. Stick that on. And blend that down. And I could finish that there, put a calyx on it. So put like the little green bit that goes on the bottom of that, and I would have a perfect little peony bud. So that's definitely one way that I could do it. So hopefully that's in focus. So there's my center. Now from there it's pretty much just all the assembly. And here, oh, I'm starting to crack these because they're very thin and they're very cold now because they've been sitting on the cold surface. This is just plastic, but it's still quite cool. So I'm having to actually introduce a bit of heat back into the petals to keep them flexible, which is good for the bigger ones, but for these smaller ones it's a bit of a pain because I'd say it's good for the big ones because they've got to hold a lot of weight outwards. So I'm going to try and keep that in focus and see if this works at all for focus. So I run around the edge of this. I know it seems weird that I'm thinning this again, but that's what actually makes the petals look better. So thin the edge and then you run the ball tool up it and that curves it and gives it a really natural look. And a little bit of water. You don't want to go crazy with the water because too much water will just make them slide around. Now, when I'm applying these, I'm imagining that the petals are meeting in the middle over top. So as I'm applying them, I'm layering them in on top of each other and I'll start to open them up on the next layer a little bit more. So around the top, through the middle, give it a bit of shape, like that. Now when I stick these on, I want to stick them from the sides because I'm trying to maintain a column of air. So I stick them from the sides because I'm trying to maintain a column of air down the back of each petal. It just gives it a more natural look and also adds some more volume to the flower. So I'm sticking it on each side to the petal before and not pressing in the middle. So that's it starting. And keep it warm. Run around the edge, run the ball tool down it to give it a curve, and water. Water, water. And over that. I'm not going up too high, but each layer is going to be very, very slightly, very slightly higher than the last. So again, apply pressure at the edge of each of those and then blend the bum end down, and that helps to really tie it all together. You can see it gets quite mucky at the bottom from all the brown and green mixing. Oh, sorry, brown and green, all the pink and green mixing. So warm it on palm of your hand so it doesn't crack. Run the ball tool around, then run down. And just apply that on. So when I'm putting the water on it, I'm just putting water here and here. So from about halfway up to there, you know, bit of a V shape to the bottom. And run that down. And like I said, this is a lot of prep and then a lot of assembly. It's all pretty much the same thing 1,000 times, but not actually 1,000, it just feels like that. So keep going. So the nice thing about the veining on that is, where are we? The nice thing about the veining on that is it kind of just highlights it. It looks like it's the actual color of the petal, and going through and re-ball tooling the edges gives you a really thin edge and doesn't thin out the center too much. Oh, I shouldn't have held that as long as I did because now it's got too hot and sticky. It's just straight on. No, Teddy. Too soon for you. Yep. Now you can interleave these if you want, but there's not really any need. They don't need it. Even with my roses, I don't really interleave them that often. So by that I mean, it's where you take the last petal that was put down, you peel it up and you put the next one under it. There's just no need to. So press that down. Sitting there. And I'll put one more. Yep. So I always make a few extras in case I crack them. If you do crack them, you can piece them back together. But it's easier just to have a few extras. Oop. See, like that one, overwarmed that on my hand, so I'll just dust that a little bit so this doesn't stick. Put it back together, run around the edge, and then down the center. And pop that on there, like that. And I don't know if that's even in focus anymore, so put that there. And again, I've got the column of air along the back of it. Press the sides down, so sort of in a V shape down to the bottom, and then you blend the bum end in. When you're doing this, you don't want to push upwards on the stick because you'll pull the lollipop stick out. And you don't want to pull down because you'll push the stick through the surface. So you've got to be really delicate with it at all times. There's nothing worse, you finish a really nice flower and then it just goes plop straight through. And I'll start to do some of these a little bit faster if I can. And it doesn't matter that some of these are a lot darker. Turn them over. And again, run from the top to the bottom. Just give it a bit of shape. These ones. Now this is where it's kind of important to give them time to set up when they're on the board again, because once you've warmed them up to make them flexible so they don't crack, you don't want them to be floppy when you're trying to apply them back to the actual cake pop itself. So yeah. Turn them over. Oh, which side's the front? That side. Run that down like that. So even the broken ones don't really matter that much. Oh, I've got two there. That's all right, now they're both warm. Run around, turn him over. Run around. Top to the bottom and top to the bottom. And that's the next size up, is it? No, same size. Right, so I've got all my petals there for this layer. And just a little bit of water. Again, you don't want to go too crazy with the water because it'll just become a sodden mess. Little bit. 1, 2, and a little down the center just in case. 1, 2, a little down the center just in case. So if I give this a few seconds each petal just to kind of start to set up a little, not set up, but the water starts to absorb so it becomes a little bit tacky. 1, down the bottom. And the kind of rougher and more feathered the edges of these are, the better it ends up looking. Now I'm going to go around this side, and these are still ever so slightly higher than the layer before. Push in from the side, and down, and on, push in from the side, and blend the bum end. Oh, I've got it more towards me than to you. Yep, blend the bum end and curve that back up. So put that on, push it in from the sides, all the way down to the bum end, blend the point down, turn, and again, each time I'm doing this, I'm trying to maintain that little column of air behind each petal so you can see down the petal to the bottom of the flower. It makes it look a lot more natural, makes it look a lot more interesting. gives it some really exciting volume quickly. And here we go. Oh, and that one's gone, so I'll just give up on that. And this one in. You can see the petals are getting higher from the center out. So from the center to the outside, they're getting higher. Just make sure that all of that's secure, because I need each of these layers to be secure and dry and set. And it's not so much dry, it's more set before I add the next layer. So let's see what I've got going on here. So I've got a few of these, 2, 4, 5, and 1. Yep, that's about right. Warm that up. And run around the edge. Run down the center. Yep. Pop that on. Sort of finishes that layer. So again, pressing from the sides, bend the bum end down. All right, I'll try and do a few of these at once again. One. So I'm just warming each of these up as I go. I don't want them too hot though, because they'll just be kind of mush when I put them on the flour. This is where batching the jobs comes in really handy. So warm them all up. Okay, then run around the edges. Run around the edges. Turn it over. Turn it over. So I'm starting to get more frilling. Then I can use one of my smaller ball tools, and we'll do 1, 2, 3 kind of ribs down the petal. That gives it a nicer shape. So then 1, 2, 3. And run around the outside again. Around the outside a bit. And 3. 1, 2, 3. So it gives the petal some structure. Those little ribs kind of help to hold the petal up on its own. And run around the outside with the bigger one first, because it's faster. Bigger ball tools are actually really good to have. And you can get the metal ball tools for about like $11, $12 at most cake shops. And they are a good investment, they're worth it. So just turn that over. And 1, 2, 3. And 1, 2, 3. Now start applying these. Oop, probably putting my hair in the way of this each time, but anyway. Now I'm going a little bit more liberal with the water, doing a stripe up the middle, just in case. It doesn't really do a lot, but 2, 3. Okay. Then apply. 1. So again, press on each side, and then pull down. I really think these look like cabbages, but anyway. 1. Oh, and I've started going in the wrong direction. So this is why interleaving the petals is actually a good thing to do, but again, I'm lazy. It's not going to happen for me. So press those on. One thing that you really want to avoid doing is creating a narrowing around the actual flower. So A lot of people, when they're doing these, they push too much around here and they end up with kind of a flower that's that shape. So it just looks wrong. It needs to be that shape because it's a ball. It's not a vase shape. So try and get that there. You can see as I'm doing this, the actual placement of the petals doesn't matter as much as you'd expect it to. Now, getting there. We've hit an hour. Sorry guys, this has gone long, but determined to get this demonstrated. Now we've just got the outside petals to go. And yeah, I definitely won't end up using all of these. But it's good to have the option. Just warming each of these up. If you've got cold hands, you might actually need a hot wheat pack or a hot water bottle, because having a bit of body heat on this is actually a good thing. It's not when you're holding on to them and you're trying to do things with them, it makes it harder, but it's important. So here we go, round. I'm just thinning out both sides of these. The technique's not amazing, but it doesn't matter. Oh. Okay. Then on that smaller one, run from the top to the bottom. It's probably too small for these. Top to the bottom, top to the bottom. I've got those 3 ribs again. And top to the bottom, top to the bottom. And that one's broken, but that's all right. Just push them back together. This is where working reasonably fast is helpful. So you're kind of constantly battling between the chocolate being too hot and too cold. But the fact that it does set up so firmly means that it will self-support, so the petals won't droop once they're actually applied. Now I've got these 5. Let's see if I can get another one just in case. These 5. Around. And we'll go from top to bottom. Maybe not as fine as it could be. Going to tear that out a little bit more. There's my broken one. A little bit of water down both sides. Take off the excess and stick it. So now with these, they can start to come down a little bit more. So I'm applying that. Let's see if I can get that to register. Okay, so I'm applying that there, like that. Bottom, and I've left that column of air behind it, and I've tucked in both the edges. This can probably start to come down a little bit more, but that's all right. Next one. Two. And bit of water. If I stick the sides in really well, that means I can have the petal lean out a little bit more, and it'll rely on its neighbour for stability. Stick that on there. I'm starting to get that kind of vase shape that I didn't really want, but it's subtle, so it's not too big a problem yet. You pretty much just keep running around the outside with more and more petals until it looks right. So just bring that up a little. And where do I want another petal? I want one here-ish, so that looks about right. Stick that on well. So I'm just blending the sides on as well as I can. You can see they're going brown where I've got too much water, and I'm blending the pink and the green, but that's okay. Oh, another one that was hiding from. Try and warm that up a little bit so it doesn't crack when I reshape it. And all the way down. No, I'll do another layer and a half, and that should be it. That should be the end of it. But you can see how it's starting to form really pretty on the outside. Well, I'm showing no one anyway. So you can see it's starting to form really nice on the outside, and the inside looks okay. I'll pop that back in there. Oh, big one. Warm them. So yeah, this one is a lot more like my own. It doesn't stay that flexible, which is not a bad thing. It's just, how do I have a naked side of a petal anyway? Fix that while I'm here. Missed one. Some OCD person who was watching earlier was probably screaming at the camera anyway. That's if anyone makes it this far. It's a long video, so getting there. I give up on that one. All right, so I've warmed these, thin the edges. Thin the edges. Then the little one, top to the middle. I really love the way the ribs kind of ruffle the edges of those and make them look a little bit more complete. Gives it so much more structure. Right, so now we can start coming out lower on these. This is where these start to come out from the bottom, so poke in on the sides and tuck in the bum end. It's probably gone blurry 100 times. So these ones start to come down lower and they'll finish out the bowl shape. I really am coming down a little bit too quickly on the edges. I should have started the layer before it coming down a bit lower, but it's all right. It's good. I'll go on this side. Same thing again. Nice and low. Press in the bottom. Bring up the sides. Then I can just encourage the top out. I'll hold on. Yeah, about there. This is becoming a very heavy flower, but it's worth it. It's the outside of these. I need to try and make sure that I've got each of these edges as secured as I possibly can. Again, I want to be able to see down the inside of the flower, but I don't want the flower to get too open too quickly, because it'll just fall. I did end up using more petals than I thought. That's all right. Are these all naked? They are. Okay, let's fix that. How on earth did I miss those anyway? I would normally say it's only the insides that doesn't matter, but it's the insides of the outer petals, you see them more. So hopefully, I'm just going to, no, I won't wash my hands. It's all right, they'll just be a bit browner. Come on, warm up nicely. That's better. Nearly done. Whoop. Tore that one, that's okay. I'll just give it a bit of an extra dusting on the outside and it'll look all right. So, with some of these thicker petals it's a little bit difficult because the core of the petal is still quite cold and brittle, but the outside is too hot, especially if you've got super hot hands like me. So, nearly done. Keep that nice and warm. Run that from the top to the bottom. You can see I'm getting bored. It's always my problem with flowers and why I don't tend to make a lot of sugar flowers. I actually really love making them, but I get bored because the end result doesn't come quick enough for me. So here we go. And this one from the top. Okay. These ones are quite tattered, but it should work for it, in theory. Yeah, bring this to where you can actually see it. Because I've been a jerk and been working with it off the edge of the camera where people can't see it, which is not helpful for anyone. I want that there. Come on, help me out. That about there. nice. Yeah, this is a huge amount of weight to put just on one little Rice Krispie ball. But it's all right, it works out okay. Where do I want another one? I want another one there. Alright, and I'll put another one down the sides there. What, a bit of that? Yep, got a bit of that. And we'll go here. There we go. All nice on the sides there. So hopefully you can see the kind of overall shape I've got. And I'll clean up the bum end of that with could really do with another petal. I'll see if I can rescue this one. Yeah. Come on, come back to me, little petal. So I'm just working that back together. Bit of that, thin the edge, flip them over, kind of bring it all back together, and down the center. Yeah, that'll do it. Now, where did I want that? I wanted that here, on that side, sort of fills it out. Yep, just down here. That looks really nice over there. Done, poked in nice. Okay, now I desperately need to go wash my hands. I'll leave that to set up a little bit and we'll put a calyx on it. Okay, so my hands aren't quite perfectly clean, but they'll do. Grab some of this. This is set up really solid now. And what have I got? I've got a Dahlia, no idea, cutter set, and I'm going to use that to make the calyx. Just move that around. I'm not sure if the camera will pick it up, but hopefully you can see just how amazing the striping is on that. See if I can get that to focus. Focus for me. There we go. Hopefully you can see the veining. The bottom of it looks really amazing, but it's too heavy for me to tip it too far. So, here we go. I'll get this together. And the calyx on one of these is actually kind of like two triangles overlapping. So I'll see if I can get something close to that. Just fatten out my cutter again a little bit. It'll be the kind of circular one. And then this will be the long strippy bit. That doesn't make any sense, but you'll see in a sec. Done. Done, done, done. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Then 1, 2, 3. Yep. Wrap that up and keep that for later. thin the edges on each of these. My strippy bits. Oh, in the wrong side of those. It's funny. Okay, got those together. Now, these actually look like this. See if we can get it all to stick. So I don't want too much water. I want just enough to kind of stick it together. Pick that up. 1, 2, 3. And the hilarious bit is I forgot to vein each of those before doing that, but that's fine. This will probably help lock it in place a bit. One. And 3. Then we'll just get that last little one going around. Alright, so that's my calyx. It's a mess, but it'll do. Bit like life, anyway. There you go. Pop that here. Let's colour it up. Where's my moss green? Go straight for moss green because it's a good strong colour. This will be the outside. If any of my sugar flower friends are actually watching this, are probably just shuddering, but it'll do. Alright, there's my quick lazy calyx. A little bit of water. Don't want that to warm up on my hand too much, but gotta do what you gotta do. Bit of water. Bit of water under there. Hopefully that'll go tacky enough. And just drop that up. And I'm going to pinch those as they go on. And I've put just a tiny bit too much water on that, not left it to go sticky enough. That's okay. So, you can't quite see that. I'll take video of that in a second, but that is it. The only thing that remains is to do a little bit of a hip and a stick. Run that down. So to do that, you just get some of this nice and warm. Not too warm, but just nice and warm. Then run it down the underside of the thing and flour your fingertips so that you can do that nicely. Bring that all the way down. These usually have quite thick stems because they've got to be to hold the flour up. And take off the excess. And more of that. And just bring down the side. Not sure if you can see that. Sort of pinching and stretching the chocolate down the stick. Then I'm going to colour that really heavily with the moss green. And I'm calling that done. Though before I do that, one of my trademarks and one of the things I really like to do to my flowers is just introduce a little bit of green back into the petals. So see if I've got this. No, that's not the nice bright one I had here. Gah. Just about need the jaws of life to get back into that. Okay. And take off some of the dark green because you don't want all that. Pick up just a little bit of this and just start introducing some of that back to the base of the petals. And that bright green just picks up some of the pink and makes it look a little bit more alive and vibrant. And I like to do it just on the tips as well, just across some of it, especially anywhere where there's damage. Sorry, I just blew on it. You should never blow on a piece of work, especially if it's going on someone's cake. It's disgusting. But then you just mix that with some red, not red, with some of your pink. It makes it go brown, so it looks a bit more like natural damage. And just bring that around. Just a little tiny bit of the fluorescent green just helps to bring it back to life a bit. So it's not a huge amount, it's just enough to kind of give it a bit more interest and pick out some of the edges more. There's a bit with a lot of damage, so I'm going to load that up with that, and then pick up some more of my red or my rose, and it'll just make it go brown. So that looks a little bit more natural. And there you have it, all done. So one very heavy, very colourful peony flower. I'll just brighten that up so you can see it. I realise this has been a bit dark, but yeah. That's one super ultra detailed peony. So thank you for watching. That was a very long video. Cheers.